What about this one? What's that? Sorry, no, that's good. What is this one? Any thoughts? No? So this is a miniature Taurus cross. And I actually love this piece. It was made in England. I don't know how, it must have had an amazing magnifying glass to be able to read it, but it belonged to Joseph Simon. And Joseph Simon started in Philadelphia, and if we looked at people who were looking back to Europe for trade, that was their income, he's one of the first who is looking more west, like a more of a pioneer. And he's trading with indigenous people. And out in the wilds of Lancaster, PA, it makes all the people who are local laugh, but it was at those days. And he was creating what we call a minyan, a little service that you had to have 10 people, and he would do that out there in Lancaster, PA. But this was more for his traveling purposes. So again, it's that story we say of balancing tradition and change. Here he was in a completely new country, which was, still being developed by pioneers and also connecting with indigenous people, and he was trying to keep his story, his own traditions going. We even have some wampum beads that he was trading as well. Okay, we'll move swiftly forward.
So it's not just for the transport road?
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, so if we did biblical parallels in the story of the ark through the desert, the possibility and the fact that the story was always possible, right? So I think it's just a very nice symbol and metaphor. Okay, so the red one takes us to the revolutionary period, and what I often ask is the salary time community, but we often ask were Jews in favour of the loyalists or the patriots? What do you think? Actually, mostly the patriots. There were a few who went to Canada or went back to Britain, but on the whole, they were supportive of this new movement because it can offer more freedom. It's what they needed and what they wanted. And the name we know is Hyman Solomon, who was a fundraiser came to Philadelphia as well, and he was a fundraiser for the revolution. And then we come to what is the most famous artifact in the museum, although I'm going to tell you for sake of transparency that this is a facsimile. Sometimes we have the original, and if we do, this is Washington's letter to the community, and if we do, we usually have a security guard here, but it sort of it goes to other places. So this is a facsimile, but this is important. So the Constitution is signed and going to be ratified, and George Washington is going to go around to all the different new states, okay? And people are presenting petitions of what they're hoping will be there. And when he comes to Newport, Rhode Island, where we already know there's a Jewish community, this guy, Moses Seixas, who's the leader of the community, not a rabbi, by the way. There are no American rabbis at this point. No homegrown ones. They imported a few every now and then. But anyway, he's just a leader of the community. He writes this letter, and what he asks is that famous phrase. He says, will the government give to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance? Will we be free to practice our religion as we want to? Will that be guaranteed as a freedom in this new country? And what George Washington writes back using exactly the same phrase and says, yes, the federal government will assure this. Repeat the phrase, but he also adds a biblical phrase about everybody sitting under their own vine tree and vines, figs. I've forgotten which it is now, but yeah, another biblical quote. So that was a huge landmark, huge milestone. because at the same time, back in Russia, in the Russian Empire, Catherine the Great was saying all Jews must stay in what they called the Pale of Settlement. Restriction of movement, restriction of trade, restriction in many, many ways. You had to have special permit to leave that area. And here, in this country, was this idea of freedom really opening up. But, and there's always a but, right? This is always at the federal level. At the state level, it's going to take a lot longer, right? Each state is going to have to go through those discussions, and it's finally all of them will assure that by 1871. So it takes quite a long time.
So would he have had access then to read what the Constitution would have been written, and then that would be his question? That's like, okay, I've read it, and we're supposed to have all these freedoms, but would he have known about, have read it and been familiar with it to ask this?
I don't know. Possibly. That's a good question, actually. I'm not sure. I think so. I mean, but it would have been a question anyway.
For sure.
Yeah, that was a big question.
But that he was holding into his word of what was written.
Yes.
Saying, hey, freedom,
Yeah.
all created equal and all that.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Little caveats.
There are a few caveats, but that's beyond our story right now, right? And also, Washington was really a hero for the Jewish community because Thanksgiving, and actually the Richmond, Virginia community wrote a special prayer for Washington. And if anybody knows yes, if you look along here, it's what we call an acrostic. So you can read down, and this is the original.
Wow.
This is the original. And it says under here, Vash, James, and Tom. And it's an acrostic, that means they've woven his name in Hebrew into the prayer. Yes, which is kind of cool. Yes, exactly. All right, moving swiftly forward. If we think of this period up till now as being mostly dominated by Ladino-speaking, Spanish and Hebrew, Spanish-speaking Jews, the Jews who came now, at this point, sort of mid-century, 1800s, are often young men on their own, and they're seeking their fortune, so to speak, new life, more freedom, and they are German-speaking. These people are usually German-speaking, often from Bavaria, and and they are often moving west. This is the West Young Men, and that's that period. What we have over here is a wagon, and we send the kids in there because this is the story of Fanny Brooks, which is a woman's story of how she went west. But I wasn't going to take you in there just because of shortage of time. But I think we'll move forward. Anybody feeling like they could do with sit down? I'm going to show a very quick movie. Take advantage if you can. We're always a little bit short of enough places to sit down, I think. Okay, so this is 1820 to 1850.
Years after independence, Americans imagined the West as an unknown land of great opportunity and promise, which an industrializing U.S. would eventually claim. By 1825, the American economy was driven by one natural resource, cotton. Slaves from Africa harvested cotton for the profit of southern plantation owners. Once processed, the cotton was shipped north, where textile mills transformed the raw materials into industrial goods. This thriving trade supported an increasing population. Jews prospered mainly in coastal cities along the Atlantic. The Erie Canal and other waterways sped settlers and merchandise inland. To compete, civic leaders developed the first American railways. By the 1840s, the pole was to the west. Soldiers, trappers, and a few Jewish peddlers broke trails along America's expanding frontier. By mid-century, a belief in manifest destiny prompted more Americans across the continent, often at lethal cost to native populations. And in 1848, a mill worker made a discovery that incited a massive worldwide migration when he found gold in the American River.
This is a nice visual. Starting here, well, most people, especially the British community.